kids are products of their environment. They're just trying to learn. I mean, constantly they're learning. So I don't know. It was really, there was no doubt in my mind that I wouldn't love Josiah because you and mom love each other almost to a gross amount, quote unquote. Nah, but
hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. At Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through personal professional development. I'm Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer here at the Center for Victory. With me today is, once again, our Chief Joy Officer, Miss Faith. Thank you for coming back on, daughter.
Thanks for having me.
Many people know you and back and forth here that listen here. One of the things that a question, probably at least, I don't want to overemphasize it, but probably at least twice a month, maybe 3 times a month, somebody is coming up to me, and it's probably more than that. That's probably a conservative estimate. People come up to me. I know a lot to me, and your mother has said this, but one of the things that is often asked, which I think, when you talk about your best day yet, most leaders that I talk to have kids, and they want their kids to be like productive people. And one of the things that we hear a lot is, a lot of siblings fighting with one another and things like that. And one of the things that you did not do with your older brother was you really didn't fight maybe at all. I mean, but we get the question of how does that relationship happen? Like, were they just two good kids? What did you do? Those kinds of things. So let me try to explain it first, and then I'll let you talk, because I think you have a lot of insight to this. I know you have a lot of insight, because I've pulled you in on these conversations before, because they've asked me in the presence of you, in the presence of your brother. And I think it is a huge topic, because it's something that I wanted for you guys. I kind of set the intention even before you were born. Like, I want however many kids I have, like, that I'm blessed with. If I have more than one, I want them to be strong together. I want them to love one another. I want them to respect one another. I don't think you need to fight all the time. I want them to be close, because I want you to grow that relationship once you're, now both of you are in adulthood. But you have always been close. And the example that I always use, and I remember quite vividly where we were at when your brother, who is older than you, about 18 months, went off to kindergarten. You were let me say this way. You were a hot mess. I remember holding you that day. I remember the door we stood by and watch. I mean, you were just in tears to watch him get on the bus. And it broke my heart, but on the other hand, it was good, because, you really felt for him, and you did a lot of things together. My belief is that it doesn't have to be like that, as most people think it has to be, with, siblings always fighting and things like that. I think you can have a lot of strength around it. But, I'm going to shut up. That was just one example. And it did. I mean, it really, when I look back at that and think about all the things that you guys did together, that I did with you, I know that both of you would anticipate me getting home from work, and it was like, I didn't have to go off and do individual things with you guys. It was like, we're doing them together. Mm-hmm. So what can you add before I start peppering you with questions here about you and your brother?
Peppering me with questions. I guess when I think of, having stories of kind of being a little bit different with Josiah, I think of, I don't know if I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade. And not that most people remember a lot of things like this, but it really stood out to me. I remember we were talking about our best friends, I think. And I had said Josiah. I was like, Josiah's my best friend. Like, I love him so much, whatever, the whole spiel. I'm like, he's a genius. He wouldn't say that, but I say that. And I remember, I don't know who it was that looked at me, and they were like, that's weird. And I, like, not even thinking back, was like, well, it's weird that you don't think that. Like, there wasn't ever a point where I was like, oh man, it's probably weird that I care about Josiah this much or care about my family this much, because I just thought it was weird that people didn't care enough about their siblings, their families, and everything. So I don't know. I think we've always been like this. People will ask now, and it's like, you should have seen us before when we were like at the same house. Like we're inseparable still. So I don't know. I'm
Yeah, I
excited to
mean,
talk more
you
about
were
it.
just actually you were just both of you were together this weekend with his wife. We had to, we didn't get done what we wanted to get done, but we pivoted a little bit because we had that time together, and we got to cherish it. But those things we laughed together. Because that last night we were all on we were on FaceTime together. You had something that you went and did, and just FaceTime everybody, and everybody was back on FaceTime again. Uh, was there ever a time where you thought that shouldn't be like that, or
Well, I thinking about, you're like, oh, did you guys fight? No, I remember the one time we kind of disagreed, and we were at our old house, which makes sense for our rooms because our rooms were across the hall from each other, but really close. Like, I mean, basically the same room up there.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. And we like argued about, not argued, but we like disagreed on something really dumb, because it's always something really dumb when you disagree like that. And we both were so upset about it. And it's funny because you could tell that we were products of our environment, because we both wrote each other a letter. I don't have it still. I wish I did. But I remember I slid the letter under the door, and then he came back and slid the letter under the door, and we were both crying. We were like, it's okay. And then we ended up playing PlayStation. So, and that was like in the span of maybe 5 minutes. So it's the only time I even remember like disagreeing with Josiah. Like, he would just come in my room and just like open the door and sit there. I'm like, what do you want? He's like, I don't know. And he just sit there. Or like, I don't know. I'd like knock on the wall when we were doing cyber school, and we like had our own codes. We like talk our own language. Like, it's just, I don't know. It never felt, it still doesn't feel weird. Like, I'm glad, especially now, that my best friend is also my brother, and now his wife, and you guys. And I don't know. I think that's, I don't know. And he's a hoot. He's funny. We're like totally different, but also the same.
now you had a lot of opportunity, both of you, to
Yeah.
support one another. I mean, one of the things that you both did was you went to each other's events.
Hmm.
I mean, you were a competitive gymnast for so many years, and he did his baseball and soccer, and then had to just kind of really choose between the two, and went with soccer. And you went to a lot of tournaments and things. But how was that kind of ordeal? I mean, because sometimes we were crammed up, close together. In the early days, you guys had to, share a bed and things like that. But was that ever weird, or was that support? Did you feel supported because he was there, and vice versa?
Yeah, I think I actually ended up doing better at competitions when he was there because I don't know. I think like when all of you are there, and I think it goes into anybody's support system when you have the more the merrier type of thing. So when he was there, it was like, oh man, like Josiah's here. He's taking time out of his day. I mean, I don't know what he'd be doing otherwise, but in my head, I was like, oh, he's taking
Right.
time out of his day. And like when you were there, because mom would take me to practice a lot because Josiah and I would have practice at the same time. But like when there was a tournament, I was there. Like, I know more about soccer than I would care to admit, but he could probably coach gymnastics now because he knows so much about it. So I don't know. I think it's weird not to support him because I mean I'm living in the same proximity as him. I don't want it to be negative. So then I want to do everything to make it positive. So learning about soccer, even watching soccer with him, like I know he had a phase where he like got scarves from teams and like the
Mm-hmm.
jerseys, and
Yeah.
I don't ever remember being like, "Oh, that's so weird." Like I was like, "Oh, that's so cool. Like you should put them on your door." Or, I don't know. There wasn't ever a narrative of not thinking he was so cool and not thinking you guys were super cool and having respect for you guys, which means respecting Josiah. I mean, he's you guys.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was actually really big. Him being at all of my stuff. I always refer to him. I'm like, He could coach gymnastics. He could probably do it if he, had some coordination with it.
Oh my
But
goodness, that would be something.
that's back to our other podcast we did with the non-talent
Yeah,
because
that would, yeah.
tried to teach him a back tuck and that didn't work well.
That would be great though. Can you see him hitting like a round off back tuck and then scissor kicking uh the soccer ball into the net?
Yeah, he'd just be like screaming and flailing, and it would be great. And you know what? I'd be there.
Yeah.
Another tournament.
So one of the things that all this is all good and well, but we want to get into the kind of the meats and potatoes of, how did you do that, or how did we do that? Because I do believe, like I said, it was on my heart even before you were born to set the intention that you guys had a great relationship, and not just mine. I mean, it was there even before I met your mother. Like, I don't know why. I just wanted, if I had kids, if I had that chance, that's what I wanted for them, is to know that and be supported by their sibling. So what did you see? Let's just talk about what you saw growing up first that kind of pushed you towards that.
Well, there's a lot of things. I think I could talk like hours and hours.
That's
about
fine.
It.
I mean, but we get this question a lot, so I want to be sure that we actually say, here are the things, right, to people. So if there's anything that you think is just trivial, I would still go ahead and say it, just because people might not be doing it.
Yeah. I think it starts with intentionality. Like, even you saying, when I had kids, this is what I wanted for them. Like, you never were like, oh, they could be like this. They could be like, it was very much decided. So there was an intentionality and decisiveness with how you raised us. There was never a time where you and mom fought. So it's like, how would I even know how to fight with Josiah if I never saw it? And I think that goes the opposite way. Like, if, say, you see that in your house all the time, the fighting, the conflict, the butting heads, and kids are products of their environment. They're just trying to learn. I mean, constantly they're learning. So I don't know. It was really, there was no doubt in my mind that I wouldn't love Josiah, because you and mom love each other almost to a gross amount, quote unquote. Nah, but just like, of course I'm going to love Josiah like that, because I want him to experience that. And I want his kids to experience that, because that's what you exemplified for us. And I think we've had a lot of really good talks about normalizing like how different we are, because it's not like Josiah and I were ever the same person. We are totally different. I would even say like polar opposites. So, but you and mom are polar opposites. So you showed us how to problem solve, how to conflict manage, but it all goes back to that intentionality. We were different because you intentionally taught us how to handle that.
What are some things that you can think of that led to things like that?
Well, it's so weird. This is my first example. This throwing Josiah under the bus big time, but he was a kid. We were playing Mario Kart on the Wii, and I'm the type of person where I don't really care if I lose. Like, I'm just kind of there to have fun, and he needs to win. So I learned that very early on, that he was like that. And I remember one time I got super mad at him because he was like crying because he lost. It's the first game I ever won. Not like I was winning many, taking titles or anything. But I remember you looked at me and you were like, that's just what he needs right now. And it wasn't ever like, and I think it goes to that platinum rule you talk about, treat others how they need to be treated. You taught us both early on that we need to do that, because Josiah just at that time didn't understand losing. So then you worked with him separately on how to, conflict manage that, how to problem solve it. But you also taught me, there are people out there who can't lose. So how are you going to handle that? And it was just like those intentional, like not really like preachy conversations. It was a conversation between, okay, well, what did you think? What did you feel? Building awareness on, what did Josiah feel? How did that make you feel when he felt like that? Probably not very good if he's crying. But I know, like, even with me, with like him trying to teach me something used to be really bad. But now if someone else teaches me, I'm like, well, it's not like Josiah teaching me. But even seeing the change of like back then to like, was it last winter I taught him how to ski? And
Oh
we
yeah.
were laughing and like he didn't care that he like kind of didn't get it at first, which before he would have been like that. But it was because of your early intervention of saying, okay, here's something that we need to work on. Not a negative or positive. Nothing was ever, oh, you can't do this. You can't act like this. You made it normal that we feel those feelings and feel big feelings. Every kid does. I mean, they do feel big feelings. So how do you navigate those intentionally to benefit other people? I think that's hopefully that answers your question. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
have
mean,
lots of examples, but
yeah, and maybe you can give us another example after I explain that. So,
yeah.
one of the things that I've always been intentional about with anything, especially when there were the two of you, anytime that the two of you were doing something together, uh, either myself or your mother were present to help facilitate that. Because if it was something that was competitive and emotions flared up, you know, you could kind of deal with it and show you how to deal with it. Because I know, especially for Josiah, uh, because people always worry about, especially like video games, like they're going to be addictive and stuff like that. But especially for Josiah, I mean, you never really played them when we were not there. But one of the things that I taught from a young age, or was the fact that we're going to do this together,
Mm-hmm.
and it never became addictive because, especially him, he would just wait for me to get home because it wasn't about the game. It was about the time together. And there's a big
Yeah.
difference. So when people were looking at those things, and then especially when the two of you were together, you know, I wasn't a helicopter parent all the time, all the time, all the time, but it
Mm-hmm.
was something that we enjoyed. It was something that you all looked forward to doing together. I mean, I could think of even just all the games that we made up. And one of
Yeah.
the things that we absolutely love, that you guys absolutely love, and I think you were three. Our we've had three or four trampolines, but I mean the first one we got when you were three. I mean, I could just all those goofy games we used to play and create, and that actually turned into. I mean, there were times where we would stop doing that, have dinner together, and then go back out and we'd lay there and do your homework, and
Yeah.
either do that together with you, uh, or you guys sometimes did it just together. But a lot of times I would just sit out there because it was just nice to sit, and we'd get it done together, and then play a different game. But it was always something. We were creating games, inside, outside, wherever we would go. We would do things. I remember our first trip, talking about supporting one another. Our first trip when you competed internationally was to Mexico, and uh, this our second trip down there. I think it was our second trip down there where mom couldn't really do anything, and I just had the two of you all day long because we had just had surgery, and we were fortunate enough to be able to still go down. But we we hunted hermit crabs. That was like a game for like 2.5 days.
That was right when we got there too.
Yeah. uh we snorkeled, man. We snorkeled all kind of all the time. I mean, the turtles, and things like that. We did the cenotes. I mean, you guys did that together. I mean, obviously I was with you, but uh, there was never any problem with that. You
Yeah.
just my point is you decided what to do together. There was give and take there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have another example.
Yeah. I was just thinking of like too, he wasn't ever jealous of what I was doing successfully, and I was never jealous of what he was doing successfully. Like he was on the varsity soccer team his freshman year. I mean, that's pretty great. And people would be like, oh, blah, 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 whatever about him being on varsity. And I just, if anything, I'd defend him because I think he's great.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, even events now we do as a family, like I know that if Josiah's there, like we're gonna giggle, we're gonna laugh because it's always what we did. And there was never a time where I felt like I needed to not connect with him, or at least that I didn't want to, because especially when I was younger, because I'd play with my dolls and then he'd have his Hot Wheel cars, and we'd like make games out of that. We'd make a whole story. Like he'd be like, well, what if we do this? I'd be like, I don't know. What about this? We like workshop stuff together. And then we'd use the whole living room and you weren't there. And that's so even when you weren't there, the priority of connecting with each other was still very much prominent. I mean, we'd play PlayStation and we would like drive backwards on purpose. And because our my mom's mom would watch NASCAR, so we were like, oh, we have to like joke with the one she doesn't like, and it was just goofy, and it wasn't ever overly serious and overly competitive because you and mom aren't competitive, and the people that were around demonstrated, unconditional love. So of course we're gonna have that for each other, and I do think even the way that I teach now, I go about it the exact same way. Like if I don't have an idea, let's make up a game. If the kids are being competitive, how can I help them with those big feelings? So it was because of Josiah and in turn you and mom that I can even teach the way that I do now. And it makes me think of, well, if there are teachers out there not doing that, then how can we help them with their big feelings about it? But I don't know. It was never, I think it's funny when people ask because to me it's common sense. But I have to remind myself, what's common sense to me isn't to everybody else. Like loving Josiah for who he is common sense to me because I never didn't. Like I admire him.
Common practice.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's a way better way of putting it. But
that's what makes it common sense. So you had half, I had half. So together. Common sense is common practice. Yeah.
Look, teamwork makes the dream work. Yeah. And I don't know. We were never pitted against each other, but rooting for each other. So, and we knew that we were different. Like you had helped us understand that we are different. So Josiah is going to want to sit in my room and not talk. And if he's in my room, I'm going to want to talk to him about everything. And he's very decided and he likes his ideas and I'll go with him because I like his ideas too. But I wanted to graduate. Well, I wanted to do PA Cyber because he started PA Cyber.
Right.
And then I wanted to graduate the same year he did because he's not going to college without me. And even the season of life, like we're first time kind of in a different seasons of life, but still very much coinciding with each other, checking in on each other, rooting for each other. So, and his wife plays into that perfectly now because now they're going to have kids that are just as goofy and rooting for each other as Josiah and I were. And I think that's cool for her to be a part of that, for him to exemplify it as a dad now. Well, soon in the next, who knows how many years, but it'll just be cool to see that, kind of the fruits of what you planted kind of thing.
So we talked about what, some of what kind of what you saw. What were there anything specific, like very specific, if you can think back? Was there anything very specific that you heard repetitively over and over again that fostered that relationship and that strengthened that relationship? I know there were because that I was intentional.
Like a quiz.
Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, early on, I think it also goes to how we were developing as individuals, because what used to drive me nuts as a kid, because as a kid, you like to complain because it gets you attention. And so Josiah would start whining or I'd start whining and you or mom would be like, don't whine, just shine. And I used to hate that. And then this year for testing for my students, I put that on the board. They're like, that's so funny. And I was like, well, it wasn't back then. So I don't know. We had like our little sayings too. God Cowbell now is kind of that was kind of the gist of like, we were always rooting for each other. And I remember we had family meetings when like, say I wasn't making the best choice or I wasn't around the best people. And I don't know, I can't think of
those. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's
like
exactly what I'm talking about because they became our core values. They're core values in our business.
Yeah.
Not everybody's, because, we're a smaller company.
Right.
Not everybody's going to have the same core values in their business that they do, in their family. But I think the importance, one of the things I wanted to note for people who are listening and asking this all the time is going back. Do you have core values? You heard that a lot. You continue to hear it a lot.
Continue to see it too. It's that same, there's a balance of it. You can say it and not do it, or you could do it and just not be able to like verbalize what that is. So I think it does play into the balance of here's the expectation, but it's not rule based or like, we're not expecting you have to do this. It was just like, okay, this is who we are. you're learning the same way. Like, let's go about it together. It was never, you need to do this. You can't feel this. You can't do this.
Now, did you see those same things, and do you see those same things lived out by your mother and I?
Oh, absolutely. Well, as much as I'm the biggest fan of Josiah, now him and his wife, I'm the biggest fan of you and mom, because it's even funny to think when people are like, oh, you're a hopeless romantic. I'm like, oh, I'm a hopeful romantic, because I've always been hopeful that, when the time comes for the right person, that it's going to be like you and mom.
Uh-huh.
I mean, of course, it takes time and it takes understanding. It's the same thing. You're building it from the ground up. So my foundation with growing up with my brother was, build each other up. Your marriage with mom is build each other up, even though you are polar opposites. You know that. So then how can you make your strengths and her strengths align? And I mean, your marriage could be studied for like years. It's impressive to see how that affects other people too. Like when you don't even have to say anything around other people. They're going to start being like, oh man, I want to be like them. I want what they're having, kind of thing. So it's the same with Josiah and I. Like, of course it's the same with us, because it's the same with you guys. Like if you didn't have as strong of a marriage, Josiah and I would not have as strong of a relationship. So, and then his wife in turn. So then when someone new comes in the family, it's like, well, now we know that our family supports Josiah enough to be like, okay, this is benefiting you. This is good for you. This aligns with what you want. So then she's going to fit in our core values too. And then when I have somebody that, and I know too that like each one of you is going to have my best interest when I do find the person, and you're going to support me no matter what. It is always positive. The narrative about all of our lives in your marriage is that it's love focused, not fear focused. It's not, oh, we can't do this because it's too big of a goal, or we can't do this because that's not what other people do. Like we were individualistic just because that's what was needed. And now it affects everybody.
The last thing I want to do here is let me go down through our core values.
Yeah.
Because these are our company, but they were initially our family.
Which is our company.
Which
too.
That's what we do. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're our family and our business. I want you to tell me what it means to you though, and how you saw it. Okay.
Like in response to with Josiah, or just in general?
More, if you could have an example for Josiah, but like it's gonna kind of dovetail into that relationship anyhow. So you already mentioned one, which is our first core value,
right?
Which is more cowbell, right? What does that mean to you? You already kind of mentioned it, but I want to make sure people.
Yeah, I'll try to give specific like stories, I guess, because I mean, if you even think about the importance of a relationship with your sibling, like I remember more things about Josiah and about what he said to me than I remember from anybody else. Like his opinion matters more to me than some people would say it should, but it matters more to me than it does to other people. More cowbell, I think I don't know if I was in level 8, I don't know what level of gymnastics. And I did a vault, and it was like one of the best vaults I had done. And it was at my home gym. And I remember looking, like I almost didn't even salute. I almost forgot because I looked over to see what Josiah would do. Like I looked over at his reaction. He like stood up out of his seat. He was like clapping, and that's back when he had the long hair. So I don't know what level that was. I kind of, not that I bullied him out of it. It was more encouraging, but, yeah, I just remember like I almost didn't salute because I was so excited. I was so jazzed to see him be jazzed too. Because I expected and anticipated. I had like a joyful anticipation that when I do something well, he's going to respond well. So I just remember thinking that, and I was like, oh man, like I was on top of the world. So that's what I think of more cowbell, at least with Josiah. Like there was never a time I didn't but I didn't anticipate him being excited with me.
Yeah. Okay, second one, be like Fred. When I say that, what do you think of?
Oh, I think of when I was grumpy.
So for those of you that aren't familiar with Fred, since we're from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania,
you should be first off.
Fred Rogers. So be like Mr. Rogers. So what does that mean to you when you look at that core value?
With Josiah, I look at when I was really grumpy, being a teenager, and him also being a teenager at the same time could have been a disaster. And I think there were times where it was like, okay, I really have to learn from this. And you and mom really had to like step in and, be like, okay, this isn't personal. This is just what we're going through right now. And when he got sick from Africa and when I broke my back, because it was around the same time, I remember we were both kind of grumpy. But I remember that was when he started just coming and sitting in my room. And I'd be like, get out of my room. He's like, no. And I remember one time he's like, well, you need this. I was like, why? And he goes, well, at least it wasn't the times he like come in and like burp or whatever,
Yeah.
like just nasty. But he just came in and sat the one day. I was literally sitting in the dark trying to be like all depressed or whatever. And he looked at me, he's like, well, you need this. You're people oriented. I remember looking, I was like, well, I don't want it. He's like, well, that's not what our role is.
Yeah.
And I just remember it's not like he was like, oh, blah, 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 really like too assertive. It was so out of a place of like peace.
Uh-huh.
He was like, well, you need this. And then I got annoyed. I'd like asked him one more time. And then I realized it's like, oh, yeah, he's kind of right. So then we'd sat there and we didn't talk at all.
Yeah.
Like I had my earphones in, but it was just the fact that he was there and he understood me and had empathy towards what I was feeling, even though he was going through things. I just feel like that is so Fred Rogers, the intentionality of like, oh no, I realized I could be sitting with you right now doing this stuff instead of not. So I'm going to do that. Even though you think you don't need it, you do because I know you. So it was that intentionality. I don't know if that's good enough specific.
That's good. Yeah, absolutely. The next one, GSD, get stuff done. Tammy version.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Think of anything in your relationship with that.
Well, I just think of who he is. I mean, he's like the poster child for getting stuff done, but so are you. So I think it's interesting because that kind of goes into the more cowbell because with Josiah, with school, I think of how like the science club that he ran and even in college, like watching him run his church group, watching him run, I mean, I don't even know half the abbreviations or whatever that he ran, but I know that with GSD now, he's in a job role that is feeding into other people. So he's getting stuff done. He's making opportunities for himself. It's not like he's waiting on somebody to get that opportunity to him. He's fast tracked it. And then I think in return of that, then he fast tracked it for me because we are always our biggest advocates for each other. Yeah. Like if someone made fun of Josiah, I can't say that I ever responded well. I can tell you I reacted. Yeah. But with him, it was like, here's a goal that I had for gymnastics. Here's a goal that I had for school. And he was like, let's get you there.
Yeah.
And let's do it now. Because he's definitely not the most patient. Neither am I. So we worked through that. We learned some awareness.
Well, I think the example there is you kind of push one another.
Oh yeah,
in a good manner.
Because we knew we could do it. There was again never the doubt that he couldn't do something. I never thought he couldn't do something. I always knew that he could, and he in return was the same way. Because again, you and Mom exemplified that fact of yes, you can do everything. Get it done. There's no need to make an excuse or to doubt that you can't because you can. Never was the narrative that I can't. I don't think I heard can't or don't or shouldn't or wouldn't, whatever. I don't think
those
I ever
examples.
Yeah, I don't think I ever heard those as a kid. Because I remember this weekend we were talking about that with our small group, and you're like, think of a time when someone told you couldn't or shouldn't do something. I was like, I still like I looked up my notes yesterday. I'm like, I have no freaking clue of what that could even be because I never heard that. And it's not like you entitled me. It wasn't like, oh, you like if it were something at the store, I was like, oh, I kind of want that. You're like, maybe that's not something we need right now. It was just the way you went about it was so beautiful. Now, I mean, annoying when I was like 4 because I was like, man, I want that Barbie doll. And you're like, I think that we can figure out a way to make it fun at home. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can work with what we have. It was never like, oh, well, you can't have that. You can't do this. Like always. I mean, always. You were like, I wanted to be a teacher. Well, you've been a teacher your whole life. It wasn't, oh, well, are you sure you want to do that? I don't think you can do that. You never doubted our ability, which in turn, Josiah and I never will doubt our abilities to each other individually and collectively as a family. We all have a role in our family. We all know that we can do it and we get it done fast.
Next one, 2 left. Be an eagle.
Well, that kind of goes into the last point. Well, because I mean, I think you've explained it on the podcast, but pigeons will crap all over you and eagles help you build you up. Yeah, help you soar. So I think, I mean, simple as just he's that kind of person. And you and Mom are those kind of people. You're eagles. So I never had to worry about anybody crapping on my ideas, even if they were nuts. And they have been, but we've made them work because you're all eagles.
And then the last one, do you have any more examples of don't whine, shine?
I didn't even I forget sometimes it's one of our core values. Well, I remember I used to get real annoyed with Josiah because he'd like really whine. And I was like, just suck it up, man. Because
He would really whine.
he would.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, sorry, Josiah. He knows though. He'd probably just giggle.
Okay.
He's a good sport about everything. It's being an eagle, probably. Sorry, that was a little pigeon of me. No, but he would like, I don't know, like he just would overthink things. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
That's the not oversimplified way. So when he would overthink things, I just remember mom looking at him and be like, is this really necessary? Not in a way that was judgmental, but just like, think of your ability. Is this really a thing that you need to be worrying about? Or when you would look at me and you just wouldn't say anything and it would drive me nuts because you and I talk all the time. So I'm like, okay, you're going to stop talking now and I need the advice. But it wasn't that I needed it. It was just you gave me that time to be like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. Like, it's like you made things that felt like it was like jumping off a cliff with no parachute to make it feel like I'm just kind of chipped my nail. Like it wasn't, there was no, I don't know. We never prioritized negatives. I think that's like the general overview of this whole thing. There's no need to be negative about it because we had each other's back and we knew we could do it. So there's no need to whine because all we were doing as a family was shining, even if things were tough.
Okay, good. You did a great job with those.
Hey, thanks.
Glad we did. I'm glad we went. I'm glad we went through that and did that.
Just a mini you, mom, and Josiah. So,
any other tips for people when you look at? Because I mean, we get this question a lot.
I know. I actually have been getting this even from students, which is crazy because even kids notice love. Even kids notice positivity, and they notice that I'm authentic. I mean, I treat them the way I treat my family, and when they're in my classroom, they're my family. So my biggest thing I could say is be intentional. And even if you have fear or you doubt something, don't show it because you never, even if you were like, oh man, she's going into what now in school? Because I didn't even start in teaching, even though I love it now and it's everything to me career wise. I mean, I started in digital media. You're like, yeah, you could do that. You're great at that. I didn't end up in here. You're like, that's okay. You'll be great at what you do. So the way that you speak to kids, to adults, to your family is going to dictate their relationship in the future, their success in the future. So be intentional, be optimistic, GSD about all of that, and establish core values for your family and that's your culture, your company. Yeah. What's your funds of knowledge for your kids going to be, or your family, or even just your significant other, your coworkers? What are your funds of knowledge? What are your core values going to be? And then GSD them.
Good advice. You've all heard it from the mouth of babes. That's it. I mean, that's locked and loaded. That's ready to go. I hope that you got some nuggets there. There were definitely lots, and thank you for the examples. I mean, that's what I miss
creating
them. When I talk to people. Like, you miss that example, and I think the example coming from you rather than me or your mother, much more impactful. So. Thanks for listening, watching today. Really appreciate all of you. Appreciate if you hit that subscribe button as well as the bell icon so you get notified when we post next. As always, for more information, you can visit our website at centerforvictory.com. And remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make this your best day yet. We'll see you next time.